Now that we have kind of a stylized look going on, let's go ahead and add in some text so we can start seeing how this can come together. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the top layer, the man layer, and then I'm going to add in my text, which will put it above everything else. So go over to your text tool, and then go ahead and let's select a color. We can just leave it black for now, and just click out somewhere in the document, and we are going to write our text. So this is going to be called 21 camera tricks. Maybe this is a video on different camera tricks that you can create. And now we can edit this text. So it's a little small right now. So if I double click inside of the text, or actually triple click, it'll highlight everything for me. And I can go ahead and make that size bigger. So we can make it 21. I'll hit the move tool in the toolbar and then just bring this out to where I can see it. And then the black is really not that well read. So let's go down and click on the text tool again. We'll triple click inside the text and let's change the color. So you can pick any color you want. Let's try white. So white's a little better, but still kind of hard to stand out. So we're gonna change that later on. I'll show you how to do a little trick to help that out. But for now, let's go ahead and change the actual font. So you'll probably want to pick some different fonts than what's preloaded. So I'm going to pick that text type tool and I'm going to triple click in here, and you can pick a font that you want by going to this option at the top and then selecting one of the fonts. So here I have all the fonts that are loaded up inside of my computer. But if you're not finding the font that you would really like, the great thing about having an Adobe CC subscription is that you can use Typekit, and Typekit gives you access to all kinds of really cool fonts. So to do that, let's go ahead and hit the move tool so we get out of there, and then go up to the top and click on type, and then go to add fonts from Typekit and select that. Once Typekit loads, you can go ahead and start searching for the font you want. So this is a great little application that you get with a Creative Cloud subscription. You can see that you can search by all fonts, sans serif fonts, serif, script, black letter, mono, handwritten, decorative, and then you can search by fonts that are good for paragraphs, fonts that are good for headings. You can search or you can apply different properties such as the weight, the width, height, contrast, and so on. And you can even type in your sample text. So it automatically brought this in for me, but you can type in what you're trying to say and see how that looks. So if we want to see, like, say the Century Gothic looks really good and we want to use this, but we want it to be nice and bold. Thumbnail images, we want to stand out, and so we want to use bold text that really pops. If you use a really thin font, it's really hard to see, especially on small devices. So go down to the weight and click on the very bold weight here. And it looks like it made it, showed it with bold, but got rid of our Century Gothic font here. Let's go ahead and see if we can search for it again. So I'm going to go to the search bar and I'm going to type in Century Gothic. There it is. I'm going to click on that. And when I do, it actually brings me to the font itself, where I can go in and see how these look. So I can see what it looks like with bold italics, with italics, or with regular. Let's say I don't want this font. I can just back up and I can go and find the font that I want. Now for the YouTube thumbnail, I don't want serif fonts that have these little endings at the end, the serifs at the end. I want something that is nice and easy to read, so I'm going to use a sans serif font. So I'm going to go ahead and click on sans serif. And let's go ahead and select a font that's good for headings, because that'll give us a better selection of fonts that are specifically good for being read. So you can see some different ones in here, and you can go ahead and activate whatever font that you want to use. So go ahead and pick out one that you like. When you're ready to use that font, you can go ahead to activate fonts and click on this little icon here. It's going to say font activation successful. It's going to give you some information. Go ahead and hit OK. And what it has done is it has activated that font. So this is called Mr. Ease XL. This was not in my library just a minute ago while we were working. So let's go back over to Photoshop. And now let's go ahead and change this to that font. So I'm going to pick the type tool, triple click on 21 camera tricks or our text. I'm going to click up here in the box and it's going to highlight it for me. And now I can actually search for that font. So I think it was called Mr. Ease. And here are all the Mr. Ease fonts loaded up for you. So Typekit is really awesome because it's a great place to search for fonts. So I'm not sure exactly which one it is that we wanted and I can't see the text. So let's grab the move tool. Let's just move this down and grab the type tool. And as I hover over these, you can see it change. So we can find one that looks really good. Okay, I think I like the Mod OT Heavy. So I'm going to select that. And I think that's going to look pretty good. So now we can go ahead and add in our text. We're going to have another piece of text in here. So we can add that in now or we can add it in later. I'll go ahead and put it in. So let's go ahead and grab that type tool. And we're going to click out here. And we're going to type in 4 perfect photos. So 21 camera tricks for perfect photos. Now this font, I want to actually be a different font than what I would use for my 21 camera tricks. It's nice to use 2 different fonts. Typically you don't want to go over 2 or 3 fonts, but if you want to use 2 different fonts, it can look really nice. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight this, and you can go back into Typekit and pick a font. I'm going to go ahead and use one that I already use often. It's called Voltage. So I'm going to click up here. I'm going to type in Voltage. There it is, Voltage Regular. And it's this kind of script handwritten font. Now I know it's a little hard to see. I'll bring it up here in this dark area so you can see it, but it's a nice little handwritten script font. So now what we can do is we can start trying to place our text around this image and seeing what works. So we have this nice white space on the left hand side, and so this is probably where we're going to put our text. So we just want to find out the best placement for this, and we can use compositional theory to place these things. We can use line of sight or whatever we want. I kind of like this open space down here, so we'll maybe start here and let's make this a little bigger. So this is 60. Let's go ahead and bump this up to 72. Okay, so that's a good start. Let's go back to our 21 camera tricks. Over in the layers panel, it created 2 type layers for us, 21 camera tricks and 4 perfect photos. Just because my mind works the way that I see things written, I'm going to drag 21 camera tricks up and put that above 4 perfect photos. Now this is too small also. So let's go ahead and change the size here. Okay, that's still too small, so you can type in any number you want. So I can go in and double this, put 144. Now this is looking a lot better. We want nice big text like this that's easy to read. You've got to remember that this is going to be looked at on not only computers, but smartphones and tablets, and it has to be legible at a smaller size. So what I like to do is, as I'm working, is I will go ahead and zoom out a couple times and see how this looks at, say, 25%, where this is actually probably closer to an actual thumbnail on YouTube. Is that text more legible? Now, it's really competing with the background, and we're gonna go ahead and fix that in just a moment. Let's go ahead and get this type where we want it, and then we'll fix it so we can read it a little better. I'll show you a little trick for that, and then also we can do some more adjusting. But I like to zoom out, zoom in. Sometimes I'll go real far out. I can still read the main title there. 4 perfect photos is getting a little hard to see, but not too bad. So you want to do that every now and then to make sure that what you're creating is legible. So I like this. Let's go ahead and move tricks down to the next line. So I'm going to hit enter. Oops. Okay, I have a huge spacing thing going on here. It's probably part of my characters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all this, and I'm going to open up the character panel. If you don't have it, go to Window and click on Character. I have it over here, so I'm going to select that. wrong one. And yeah, this, I have a spacing, which one is this called? I always forget the names of these, but this is the spacing from line to line spacing, I guess you'd call it. It's at 400 points. So we could just type something in here. I could just put in 100 and see how that looks. Or you can click and drag that icon and it'll automatically move it for you. So this is really cool. This is a nice way to do this. So I can go ahead and click my move tool and then see how this looks. This isn't a bad start. So I think I might actually would like to put tricks a little bigger because I want that text to stand out. By using hierarchy, what we can do is we can make tricks really pop the most, so it draws a person in, then they can read 21 camera tricks and then 4 perfect photos, and hopefully that sells them enough to want to click on this. So there's a couple different ways that we can do this. The easiest way for me, I feel like, is to go ahead and click that type tool, and let's just go ahead and erase this. And we're going to go to 21 camera tricks and make a duplicate. So I can click on that. I can right click and go to duplicate layer, or I can click and drag it to the new layer icon and it will make a duplicate for me. Let's go ahead and grab the move tool and move that out of there so we can see it, and grab that type tool. Now the reason why I duplicate it instead of making it from scratch is it'll save the same information of the font, so the font family and the heavy weight and the 144 count. So that just makes it a little easier. We'll call this tricks. So I'll go ahead and grab the move tool, and you'll see it renames that for us in the layers panel. And now we can move this independently of the 21 camera. So 21 camera tricks, but we want to make this big. And what I like to do is I like to have this left side meet up with the right side of this top phrase. So let's go ahead and make the size of this bigger. So what I can do is I can keep punching in the number that I think it would be, or I can go to the size icon and you see my cursor changes to double arrows, and I can click and drag to make that bigger. I can also do that in the character panel, so that's a little easier for me to see. So I like to use this character panel, and I'm going to drag that over until they're both lining up together. Now let's go ahead and move that down. And what happens is it makes it nice and big for us. I just want to make it a touch bigger. And you can have fun with this and do whatever you would like. But what this is doing is it's really allowing me to have tricks be the main word that people will see as they're scrolling through, and then hopefully they'll stop and read the rest of the phrasing. So I'm going to grab the tricks layer and drop that below the 21 camera layer. Now I want to group these two together because I want to keep moving them together, not independently. So I'm going to select 21 camera, and I'm going to hold the shift key and select tricks, and I'm going to group these into a group so I can move them together. So I can go up to the top to layer, and then go down to group layers. I can use the shortcut key Control G or Command G also to group these. It's going to put those in a group, so let's go ahead and name these. Oh, I have caps lock on. So we'll call that main heading. And when I open up the folder there, you can see both of those are there together. If I hide the group, it'll hide both of them for me. I can collapse a folder, and then if I grab my move tool, I can actually move these independently. Now you'll notice when I grabbed it, it just moved this one layer, and that's not what I want. And that's because at the top for the move tool, layer is selected as the move method. So if you click on that drop-down menu and you go to group, it'll actually grab them as the group that they are. So if you want to move them separately, you can change this to layer and move that one separately. Or if you want to move them together, change it to group, and then we can move this as one group. So this is starting to come together, but obviously it doesn't look great. We still have a couple problems. The text doesn't look good running into him, and it's a little hard to see with the background because these values are competing with each other. We actually need some darker values. If I bring it up to the top where this red dark area is, it's a little easier to see, or even over his clothes, it's easier to see. But out here in the center, because there's higher values where this blue is, it's making it kind of difficult. We're going to do a little trick. We're just going to use a gradient to darken this side of the image, and we're going to fade that over into the right side of the image, and it'll just make this text pop a little more. Let's go ahead and close that character panel. I'm going to go ahead and save real quick. And I just want to create a basic gradient layer that's going to be underneath this, but above the background, because if it's behind the background, we won't see it. And if it's above the text, it'll cover everything up. So click on the background layer, and whenever we create a new layer, it will add it above the background layer, and it'll actually be underneath everything else. So go down to your adjustment layer options, and then go to gradient. That creates a gradient for us, and it's already starting out looking pretty good. However, one issue that we're having is the gradient map and the black and white adjustment layers are affecting everything beneath it, and this isn't where we want to have this gradient fill because it's getting that red color from the gradient map. Let's just go ahead and hit OK for now to save this gradient out, but we're going to click and drag that above these two adjustment layers. So I put it above the gradient map and the black and white map so that it's not affecting that gradient fill. Now we can click on the gradient fill, and if we double click on that gradient, it'll bring our gradient fill options back up, and we can adjust this any way we want. So for instance, if we change the scale, it's actually going to make our gradients bigger or smaller. So as we bring this down, you can see it gets a little bigger. And as we bring it up, it scales it out. Let's make that 100. Oops. We can change the angle. And this is really what I want to do. I want to change the angle so that the gradient is coming from this side. So it's pointing in this direction. So it starts black over here, and then it falls off into the image. So if you look at the gradient at the top, you can see what's happening. It's going from black to transparent, not black to white, but black to transparent. So we have black on the left-hand side, and we have the transparency on the right. So we're seeing the image, and now you can see that text is really starting to pop a lot more and a lot easier, and it's giving this cool kind of stylized feel. I'm going to go ahead and just make that angle 0. And I'm going to manipulate the gradient a little bit. So click on the gradient. It'll bring up the gradient editor. And at the bottom is the colors. You saw that before when we changed the gradient map. But at the top is the transparency. Now we can click and drag these around. And as I drag the transparency of the black channel over a little bit, you'll see it actually fills in on the image a little bit too. And that's kind of what I want. I want to have a nice black border on this side, to where we can see that a little bit better. Now I could go completely black, or that's probably a little too much. So I'm going to back that off a little bit. And I just want to make sure that it's enough to where I see some of this background, but we have this nice dark black border where that's making this text pop a lot more for us. Now text looks like it's still a little big. We might have to bring the text size down a little bit, but those are things that we can edit and add as we go along. So go ahead and hit the OK button. Hit OK here, and now that text is becoming easier to see, and we still have this cool stylized effect in the background that looks nice. So another thing that I notice is the text is above the man, and that isn't really working out real well for us either. We don't want that. We want it to go behind him because it's going to make a kind of cool effect if we do that. So go to this main heading group, select it, and then let's drag that underneath the man, but above everything else, such as the background and the gradient. And what it does is it puts the text behind him, but over everything else. And that looks really cool. Only you can't read it real well, so I think our sizing is a little off. We probably need to make this a little bit smaller. So let's go into that main heading, click on 21 camera, click your type tool. We'll select that. I'll just go up to the size, and I'll click on the icon, and I'll drag it down. And what I want to do is I do want it to go behind him because I think that's kind of a cool feature. And if you see this, you can pretty much make out what this says. That's not too hard to see because you can put together that says camera, even though that A is covered up. But I like how it does that. It gives it kind of a three-dimensional feel. So let's go down to tricks. And we need to adjust this. And this might take a little bit of playing back and forth, getting the right size, but that's all part of the fun. Now, if I don't line it up perfectly with the A, that's okay. But it looks like I need to probably come in a little bit more. And we're just going to go back and forth here for a moment. And you don't have to highlight it every time if you don't want to. Let's see. It's actually smart enough to know I want to move this up. So I can click and drag, and again we have group turned on, so let's change that to layer. We can click and drag this, or you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard. So for fine tuning, I'll use my arrow keys and I'll pick those up together. Let's change that back to group, and let's move that over a little bit. And what I want is our center line is right here, but again, I don't like it perfectly center. I like to have it above the center line just a little bit because it catches the eye a little bit better. So I might hide a little bit of the text. I'm looking at his knuckle right here where the S is. I don't like both ends of the S getting covered up, but if one end of the S is sticking out and then this piece is in, that's okay with me. So that looks pretty cool. So let's go ahead and grab for perfect photos. We'll move that down. We could even stick it in there with the text once we get it all into one group, but I'm going to go ahead and grab this. Oh, it looks like I actually did put it in there. I didn't mean to do that. Let's pull it out of the group. We don't want it in the group. We want it separate right now. Later on, you can add it in if you want. And then now, this text, we want it lined up on the left, and we can probably make it a little bigger too. So let's just make this a little larger. And that looks pretty good. Maybe we center this. Let's see how this looks. And a lot of the creative process is just kind of moving around the workspace and the white space of your design and just kind of seeing what fits. So that doesn't look too bad. I'm going to center justify this, bring it over, and then when I make it bigger, it'll do it from the center. Okay, I think that looks pretty cool. The only other thing you could do with the text if you wanted to is you could change the colors of these. I like the big white bold. Again, if we zoom out and look at this at 25%, you can still read that. So if someone was scrolling on YouTube, they could take a look at this and it would actually be pretty legible. It looks actually a little high now that I zoom out. So I might take my tool here and I'm going to use my arrow keys and just bump that down a little bit and just see how that looks. Yeah, I think it was a little too high. I think that looks good. So that's one of the important things about zooming out. I can still read this even at 12.5%. That's a very small image, but it's still very legible. So that's something you'll definitely want to do. But I kind of like how this is going. I like how it's following the contours of the hand here. It's kind of blending in a little bit, and this is easy to see. You can mess around with the different colors and see what looks good. For instance, I might change out the for perfect photos to a different color. Maybe I color pick his shirt, or maybe that blue in the background. So that blue works good because it's part of the background. Maybe make it as bright as possible so it really pops, and hit OK. And that just gives another little extra style. So we have two different colors for the two different texts and two different fonts. And this is starting to come together. Let's go ahead and save. And we'll zoom out again. And, you know, for perfect photos is a little hard to see, but that's like the second heading. It's not the main heading, so that's okay. So this is starting to look good. I really like the way that this has turned out.